Hello and welcome to the Woman Up podcast. Woman Up speaks to and about artists, academics, writers and activists, midwives, carers and more. All mothers or parents and all women and non-binary people. Those challenging ideas and ideals, questioning assumptions and provoking social change. The platform is dedicated to the people and women that are taking risks, to the ones trying to change current structures founded on biases that have to do with gender, caring, responsibilities, race and the integration of the private and the public. We will have conversations about lived experiences, achievements and aspirations. We'll also share campaigns and awareness around crucial intersectional struggles and subjects. Hello and welcome to Woman Up podcast. I'm Susan Merrick and today I'm speaking with Louise Ashcroft. Louise is an artist who makes video, performance, audio, watercolours and objects which humorously chronicle her critical meddling in real-life situations. Often her work involves analysing cultural content, like the Argos catalogue, call centres, tech culture, reproductive industry or breakfast cereal marketing. She's made several audio works with BBC Sounds and has spoken at leading digital arts festivals such as KIKK and Chaos Computer Congress. She's presented work in tons of places actually. I'm going to put the bio underneath it and I really want everyone to have a look because it goes from Tate Learning, BQ Berlin, Latitude Festival, Camden's People's Theatre, Museum of London Lates, there's loads. Louise teaches fine art at Goldsmiths, University in London and co-founded the free peer-led art school AltMFA in 2010. She likes expensive trainers and angry Marxist rhetoric. And also Louise is a friend of mine, so I'm going to put that in there because when we get chatty that'll explain why. Hi Louise, welcome to Woman Up.
Hi Sue, thanks so much. I put that bit at the end that I like Marxist rhetoric and trainers just to show the hypocrisy, just to offset the worthiness of being someone that meddles in things critically.
I like it. I like your taste in trainers as well. And actually, on the subject of trainers, I'm going to go straight into the fact that most of you won't know this because we don't usually put the video to our podcast out. We just put the audio. But Louise and I are both sporting England merch today. I've got my Lionesses Women's Euros England 2022 red t-shirt on, and Louise has got an England baseball cap on. Woo!
I'm proud of it. I mean, I was trying not to buy anything from the fan shop, but then it was so sunny waiting for the Lionesses victory appearance that I just thought I need this and I will wear it every day to justify it.
I think I mean, yeah, it probably doesn't work when you've got a capitalist rhetoric to be buying stuff anyway. But I think it's important because I spoke to somebody today who isn't really into football, but she said that her partner was watching the match on his phone at a festival they were at the weekend. And a young kid came over who is mad into football, a young lad. And he was saying, "What are you watching?" And he didn't even know about the match because his dad's not into women's football at all. And because Grant was watching it, this kid was then interested and wanted to know all about it. So anything that you can do to make it visible, I think is so important. And you had a post on Instagram actually about that recently, Lou, and it got me really excited because I love that you've. So can we talk a bit about football first?
Yeah. I totally agree with that thing of sometimes people's parents not being into it, or even just chatting to people and women too, who I've heard saying, "Oh, women's football isn't really like men's football. It's not like the real football, so I'm not really into it." But it's like, of course, it's slightly different because biologically there are some differences like hip ratio, there's just some differences physically that a lot of women will have. Like, it doesn't make it the men's the default. Like that, it really kind of upsets me that women would say that as well, because it's just as exciting to watch, I think, if not more so, because
it was so exciting this weekend. Yeah,
everyone's difference is celebrated. I mean, I think the team can be completely more racially diverse, and that's an issue to do with like what players are paid and the whole legacy of that is not a viable profession for most people, let alone if you're already marginalized. And people have really struggled to be in that team. Like people in that team in the past were homeless at points, and you know they're still only paid 30 grand a year in the Women's Super League, which is like the Premier League, which is like a low salary for a sort of professional career. So yeah, like I'm really passionate about women's football, and just because for me growing up it was a space where I could be me as a kind of tomboy, and to explore my gender, and a kind of queer space for me as well. But kind of before I knew that was possible. So yeah, my Instagram post was just kind of being a bit emotional about the fact that the Lionesses had given visibility to this sport that is so inclusive the way they do it. It's so much about everyone celebrating each other for who they are, and not competing against each other, but kind of doing feminist economics and ecologies, whilst also being fierce and competitive. And yeah, it's a kind of, that's a goal for me as an artist. I don't think we operate in that way as artists. We're pitted against each other. If we work in ways which are more socially engaged, it's often less visible as like authored art practice. But I think you don't have to give up the individual in order to work in a way which isn't individualistic. So yeah, for me, they showed a model of that, but also a way of being a woman that is maybe more me.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I love that. Yeah, I like that you talk about representation, because yeah, you're right, it could definitely be more racially diverse, but that kind of goes back down to funding for like grassroots level football, doesn't it, in general? I mean, in our area, we've had loads more girls and women's football funding start to happen in the last, I'd say, 4 or 5 years. And that's been fantastic because it has got loads more people in, but it's still reliant on parents being able to take kids to training in order to get to matches and in order for clubs to pick them. And that, yeah, it does end up meaning that not everybody gets the opportunities early on. So
Yeah.
still a way to go, but amazing result, amazing for women.
Yeah, it's so fun.
And for England, and for English football.
Yeah, exactly. And like I know we sometimes talk about our kind of class dysphoria being middle class people that have a kind of family history of being working class or being from places that are historically working class or having a working class identity, and being northern and all this kind of, who am I in regards to like class and privilege. And so I think, yeah, football at the moment with the Lionesses is cutting through a lot of that, and that really makes me happy that it feels like some kind of progress is being made, and that it can be for everyone. So yeah, that and as a kind of from a queer perspective, seeing the representation of lots of gay and bisexual women on that team, as well as the straight girls, even the really high femme straight girls, the high femme gay girls, the kind of tomboys and the kind of butchness, and all of this coming together like in the same people, all these in one person even, and just like, yes, this is great, and this is what we need young people to be seeing. And if the men's game can learn a little bit from that, like, I'm still talking in binaries as well. I'm really aware that this is still, like, I was thinking on my run this morning, also, would there ever be like trans representation within these binaries? And then I was wondering, like, when that could happen, or how that could happen, and just kind of the way it's set up is almost kind of makes that hard to happen.
Yeah.
Actually, it doesn't take much inventiveness to figure out ways of doing these things. It's just that historically it's always been so binary. Yeah. So I think it'd be really exciting to think beyond that. And it's been so fun. Like, everyone, it's brought everyone together, and we really needed it. And so I hope that we can just keep going with that energy. And like, for me, it's really helped me just today thinking about my art practice. Like, what I was having a little coffee with myself that I do occasionally as a kind of annual general meeting with myself, but more, I do it more often than that, just to kind of think, well, what's the big picture aim of what am I trying to do with my practice and my life? And then what's my vision for how I am going to do that? And then the planning of actual strategy. What works do I want to make? How am I going to make them? How am I going to operate? What values do I have, and how do I put them into place? And just even seeing like how working towards a common goal together and being quite clear and focused, the way that the Lionesses did that has fed into how I'm thinking about what's next in my practice. And it's helped me to re-motivate myself with my show that's that we're going to talk about, which is Bird Hut Sperm Bank, which is a theatre show, a one-woman, 1 hour theatre show about reproductive rights and my own personal situation around ambivalence towards having kids or not. And as someone who doesn't have kids, and someone who is 39, it's a show that is very critical to that time period of needing to make a really fast decision. If I want kids, I have to do it right now. And yeah, like, I'd started to get a bit less motivated about preparing for the next showing of that work at Camden People's Theatre in September. I think because I'd done it once and I'd got it out of my system, and I've moved on a bit in my thinking about having kids or not through the process of making the work. So I was slightly putting off rehearsing it again and preparing and marketing it, I think, as a kind of psychological shutting down of the whole thing. So today I just needed to like stare that right in the face and be like, what am I feeling about it? Because I think when we make work, often as artists or just as people trying to do something that is really real and that addresses important things to do with us and society, when it's something that's super important to us, we go really deep with it. And then you can find that it's sort of easy to just build a big wall up as soon as you've made the work and then move on to the next work, which I have a tendency to do. And with this work, I want it to have a longer life so that it can reach more audiences, because it's a bit about gay and queer access to reproductive assistance. So I don't know if you know much about it, but you do because you've seen the show and it touches on it. But so if you're in a straight relationship, you have to have a kind of proof of 2 years of trying to have a baby before you can get free IVF on the NHS. And that it differs depending on your postcode. But most straight couples will have some access to free IVF after a couple of years of trying. But if you're in a gay female relationship or a gay female and non-binary, like, I don't know even how they classify this, because I know some gay guys who don't have access to any of that. But yeah, you can't really be trying. So you have to pay for insemination attempts, and sometimes it can be up to 12 of those, which can cost a lot of money, like tens of thousands of pounds. So it can leave lesbians and bisexual women in same-sex relationships in very difficult debt.
I have friends who've gone through the circumstances and the financial pain of it.
Yeah, and it's sort of obviously unequal. And so even it's not in this show that I'm saying everyone should have free IVF or everyone has a right to have a kid. I don't even know that I think that, like I don't, it's not that I'm saying everyone should. I'm just saying if some people should, then everyone should. But if, or no one should, or because obviously there's limited money, and that might mean that some cancer treatment doesn't have some money. And so it's like, I haven't gone into the detail of what shouldn't get that, there's limits, there's finite resources on the earth, but it's just a really obvious case of discrimination as far as I'm concerned. But the government has done a report on that, found it to be discriminatory. And so hopefully in the near future, there will be some changes which will make my show obsolete. The Tories obviously oppressing queer art as usual, but also it's kind of good for wider society.
But you're right though that your work has started from that personal perspective, and so it could very easily be shut down when you've kind of moved on personally from talking about that. But it's such a massive topic socially, and you make work around social topics, so it's totally relevant and actually pretty important that you do carry on with it, because the way that you talk about work, or the way that you talk about life, which is your work, is so powerful and so effective, and so much fun, Louise. It's always fun to hear and see your work. Like, I always have the best time and have really achy face.
Don't know why I want it to be fun, but I think it's so that it has a pop aspect that makes it accessible. And like, I really believe in kind of like pleasure and a pro-pleasure way of just relating to things that are difficult. And I think that is a kind of feminist stance for me, because it rather than having to be victimized, it's reclaiming a kind of power to be happy in spite of and through difficulties, and then sharing that is a really, I feel like it galvanizes people, motivates people, makes people feel like they can do something and they won't be squashed by a problem. And hopefully that means that people leave and they're like, oh, maybe I can do this differently, which the show, without like spoiling the ending of the show, but whilst it starts with kind of thinking of barriers to reproduction and barriers to even wanting to start a family and all these questions, and then like relationship disagreements with my girlfriend about whether to have kids or not, or whether we would be able to really cope with it. And then it goes through thinking through other ways that we could be in children's lives, or even just people's lives as carers and kind of supporters of each other, that maybe branch out a bit from traditional nuclear family structures. And it doesn't really say, well, oh, I've come up with this idea, because this, like the mutual aid movement, has a history of immigrant communities having to invent their own kind of support structures when there are none available. But also, like, my friends with kids already do mutual aid for each other because they have to. So Yeah, I don't know. It's not like I have the answers, but more through thinking through my own situation and hoping that I'm weaving together a resource list of kind of touchstones to things other people have suggested or done. And the show is very like anecdotal about me, but I feel like there's almost a book or something in there that's a bit more theoretical and a bit more of a kind of collection of other people's that refers to other people's work and histories, and because it's literally just a drop in the ocean of this subject matter of childlessness or child ambivalence about whether to have kids and different ways of having kids. There is like some literature out there, some theory, also some kind of more personal stories of people's struggles. But yeah, they're not really rethinking what the structure could be, and most of them end up with a kind of my IVF success story thing. And so like I didn't really want mine to end like that in the end. And in my life, in the end, I decided that there are other ways, and people have already done them, but maybe they're not that visible, and maybe where the binaries of, or the gender binary is also replicated in the parent and non-parent binary. And it's like, I don't want to be a non-parent or a parent. I just want to be part of a bigger family. I don't want to be kept out of family. So yeah, I feel like just even going through that in my head has helped me to figure out ways that I can just like do a bit of babysitting, or take, like, my neighbours' kids came along to the Lionesses Victory event thing with me for a bit, and then they got a bit bored, but like, and their dad took them home, and then I hung out with them a few days ago as well and got a stomach bug off them, and that was the youth rebelling against me for my not actually fully committing to child rearing.
That's them proper that's them properly sharing the love, is what that is.
It is like they're getting right into the ecosystem of my body. And yeah, but I've been exploring things like you can be a sort of support person for a foster kid who might want to have an adult who's in their life but isn't their foster parent, and that's kind of exciting because it helps out everyone in that. And so you'd have regular meetings with someone and kind of be a presence in their life, but without them living with you. I think there's so many different models that are being invented and that already exist, but I didn't know about them. And I kind of think in school, or even just in community centres or the NHS or something, there should be some space where you can plan your life and your family building, which shows you all the different options, a bit like a job centre, but for your family. But like a family planning clinic basically just means how to like get free contraception.
Yeah.
So, but what if it was actually a family planning thing, and you're like, well, what are all the different ways that you could have a family, and let's invent new ones all the time together. And that's why I don't have a real job. Because I live in a dream world. But also,
I love that, Louise, and it's, you know, as you say, there's loads and loads of resources and things people have done, but it's often always in different down different avenues, isn't it? I mean, looking at it just keeps making me think about the feminists, the first wave of feminism, where people, you know, went out of their way to not have kids and to disrupt any heteronormative family structure whatsoever, and I'm not involved in any discussion, but I know that those still existed. Do you think your work kind of sits alongside that in any way?
Don't know, because like I was researching the child free by choice kind of Reddit movement. It isn't just like I'm being mean about it, but it feels like there's a very kind of anti parent feel about some of the kind of, it is a community that identifies as child free in a quite defiant way, maybe a bit like that first wave feminist kind of resistance through not having kids. And I think like there's a smugness about it that kind of put me off, because I don't know if it is always a choice to be child free. It's like, if you're making that choice, it's probably because it means that you're giving up something that you don't want to give up, or you're which is a choice, but it's like, it's also, we're all part of a labor market that means that we have to work and have careers in order to survive, and they're often really precarious or often really difficult, especially if you're in the creative industries. And even just for anyone, like financially, it's super difficult to have kids and to adopt. I mean, with fostering, you get paid, whereas with adoption, you don't, and you have to have savings. And so there's a kind of economic barrier to parenting and adoption. And so I'm getting a bit lost, but I think that the child free by choice movement is a bit like focused on choice, which I see as slightly an issue, because like obviously choice is a really loaded word in terms of like pro-choice or like a kind of abortion rights stuff, but it's also a word that capitalism is based on, like, oh, we have to have consumer choice. Like, I don't know whether like having kids is a choice for me. It's like it ended up not really being a choice, but now I have kind of gone through all the possible ways I could do it and found that I don't really have a choice. Now I'm inventing other ways and finding that I can choose all of the choices. Kind of like, so whatever happens in someone's life, like they will make the best of it and find ways, and it won't be the same, but it will be equally exciting, I think. So yeah, I don't know, I'm a bit worried about the kind of identifying as a thing that means you can't be another thing as well, because it feels at odds with a kind of questioning that I'm always trying to do. I always like want to question and be devil's advocate and just be like, think the opposite just to be annoying. And yeah, so like I quite enjoy the possibility of being all the contradictory things at once.
I love that about you though, Louise.
Well, you're like that too, aren't you?
Yeah, when I'm feeling brave, I guess. Oh yeah, naturally, my partner always says that I go against him no matter what, just to put the other side, and it's probably true.
Everyone's partner says that. It's an argument.
I'm interested, like in all the research you did for this, you touched on lots of kind of different ways of caring and being collective and family and how people connect with each other. Do you think that's possibly always something that you've been interested in? Because that really connects back to your AltMFA work back, like 12 years ago.
Yeah, like with AltMFA, so it's basically, it just was started as a Monday night meetup group for artists when I was working as a fabricator, making those butterfly paintings that Damien Hirst has. But it was really good as a job after art school, because it was loads of recent graduates hanging out together, making his work and chatting while we were doing it, because you could easily chat. So a few of us started meeting and talking about our own work and doing kind of crypts and asking people to come and visit us that were more established artists, and just kind of making our own art school. And that ethos of like do it yourself, it's so much who I am, and I don't know where it comes from, but it might be part of my grandma making all her own clothes, and my parents being really good at making something out of the random stuff in the fridge rather than going and buying something for a recipe. Like that kind of ad hocism and improv, it's part of just how people get through everyday life. Like most people, if you've got a few kids, you can't kind of curate every dinner time. You have to be quite resourceful. And I think like resourcefulness is definitely in my blood and in my kind of value system, my set of values. And I think artists are really good at being resourceful. So why seek validation and permission when you realize that art school is actually just something that you can make on your own for free. And a lot of the things that you need, you already have. You just need to give a structure to that. And so I think, like the DIY ethos is absolutely in me, but also that need to be in a team. Like it's why I love watching the Lionesses, is why I want to be in a team sport, even at work. We're quite atomized. We're starting to become more of a team in with my colleagues who are all tutors on the fine art course and the fine art and art history course at Goldsmiths. So they're all brilliant people, but do we see each other? Not hardly ever. But we're starting to form closer bonds. And like when I feel like I'm in a team with other artists, I'm much more ambitious. Like when I'm doing it on my own, there's something like, I'm just, well, what's the point? Like I don't want to win on my own. Like what? It's just for the sake of it. Like if you're doing that and you're sharing in it, I feel much more able to kind of have a focus and a goal. And even if that's thinking about who went before you that was like you, like, so thinking about who you are and what you stand for, and are you in the wake of other people who've been through these things, so your community might not even still be alive, or it might be people that you don't know as well, but just kind of finding your home as an artist and a person and your network. Like it isn't just about networking with people who can give you opportunities, it's about creating a kind of context for yourself socially and as a person and ideologically.
That's really interesting. So I've probably called, I don't know if I've used the word, but I've definitely worked with people who've maybe called their work, their baby, or their project is their baby, and I get it, but I've never really thought of it in that sense, because for me, work comes far more easily to me when I collaborate, when I work with other people, because you're sharing responsibility and you're sharing ideas, and so it's not, the onus isn't just on you, and you get to have more fun with it, and you can play with it more, and you've got just more brains on it than one, and that's kind of how I needed to raise my kids as well. I was having freakouts on my own, but having a partner and having friends and having family around meant that I could do it, or at least just about manage. But it is like that.
It's social, and it's like, I was talking to someone that lives on a boat the other day, and she said that it's the things that go wrong that mean that you have to talk to your neighbours, because if you can't like change a water pump or something, then you've got to ask someone. So when you're living on a boat, you kind of you're always facing little situations like that where you need a bit of help to hold something. And so it's like the kind of friction in life that forces us to connect. Whereas if everyone has a big house with a big wall around it and the resources to just get everything fixed by paying someone, then they might be quite lonely. So, and that's also something that I found when I was really thinking about, well, how could I be a parent without being a parent? And I started thinking, well, I could be a floating parent for the community. I could be the kind of Uber parent, like that would like on demand kind of gig economy. It sounds really dystopian, and I explore that as well, like the kind of the way that capitalism would absolutely exploit that convenience. But if there was a way of being available, but without being kind of just a financial contract, because like this idea of connection being more part of everyday life because of difficulties, once you can just pay someone to do something for you, like have babysitting all the time on tap, or get all the jobs done by someone and there's no limit to the funding, then you don't really have to engage with other people or the problems that come up with like sort of social practice or social life or just being human. So like I was really thinking like there aren't that many models for caring for each other's kids that don't involve either family or kind of very close friends, kind of godparent structure, or paying someone. And like it's the idea of a stranger helping you out with your kids is quite scary and seems like it could be a safeguarding issue. But as soon as you pay them a tenner, then it's not an issue anymore. So why does that financial contract remove the fear of a boundary being crossed, I think, between the private and the public? Because you can get rid of them easily if you're paying them. There's no love there. There's no, even if there is, you can just tell them you don't want them anymore. Whereas if there's no financial exchange, that's more complicated, isn't it? Social contract.
Yeah. Do you remember there was a case a few years ago? I can't remember, but two women. Basically, I can't remember if it was a job share or if they just both had part-time jobs, and when one was working, the other was looking after the kids, and then the other was working, the other was looking after them. No money involved, and there was a real they literally got in trouble for it, but I can't remember the details of it, which makes for really poor podcast listening. But I was just going to try and do a quick search, but
it's a good story, like, because I think I can totally imagine that it's written into law, this idea of what even what a child is. Like, I think my friend, the artist Jack Tan, was telling me when I was picking his brains about the law around reproductive rights and family and having kids, but other possible ways of parenting. I think he told me that the idea of the child doesn't really have a proper definition. Like, you can't really define what a child is, or that definition isn't really agreed upon. Like, obviously you can have an age, but that cutoff is almost arbitrary. Like, people are different at different ages, and like why that cutoff? What have we always differentiated between the adult and the child? When is someone able to kind of make choices and decisions in a way which is safe for them to do? Like, are they suddenly able to do that? I don't know. I'm just really interested in the legal side.
So I've just found so I think this is the one that I was talking about. basically, right, so it was two policewomen who had a friendly childcare agreement, basically. And this article, again, I've not scanned this to make sure it's a good source, but it said two policewomen were being investigated as they decided to look after each other's children when the other was at work so they could job share. And this says, sounds like a sensible solution. However, Ofsted rules stated that if one person who is not related to a second person provides childcare for their child outside the home for more than 2 hours a day and in return receives a reward, which could be, you know, the ability to go off to work, whatever, this child carer must legally become a registered childminder. And they said it was like the reward, it could be something small as a box of chocolates or a drink or anything. There's like, there can't be any kind of reward. In this case, the reward was deemed to be the reciprocal childcare agreement.
It's really that is really bad. Like, because that is mutual aid. Like, that is what people have done and have had to do and do. Like, that is friendship. It is kind of working together as a community. But it's because of safeguarding, I guess, that there has to be health and safety and, you know, all of this stuff, which it's like health and safety is such an important like movement to protect like workers and to protect people from like exploitation from like big organizations that only care about profit. But there's also, with like workers' rights, that around that there's also a kind of payoff, which is that everything has to be done in this really bureaucratic way. Yeah. So that removes the agency from individuals to be people together.
And it's that, again, in that situation, I mean, I might be looking at a really old article there. There might have been some changes since that, so I'll say that as well. We might need to look that up afterwards. But when, like, the situation during COVID, when so many part-time workers or people who were on 0-hour contracts or you know, were self-employed but hadn't earned enough, you know, there were lots of people, women, who were penalised because of the structures of things, the structures that are set up to support full-time workers and men often. So that kind of, it's those who are providing the childcare, which is still predominantly women in all of that. I've lost my flow a little bit, but that idea that the structures that are in place, the legalities that you have to follow, penalise women who are wanting to work at all, or women who are wanting to have this reciprocal kind of care and collective way of living. Just our society is just not set up for it. It's set up for heteronormative structures, which have somebody in the home and have somebody out to work.
Yeah, and I wonder when that, because I know that wasn't always the case even fairly recently. Like, even the kind of 1950s nuclear family had much more of a connection to the street, and architecturally, like, I live in North London, or northeast London, Walthamstow, in a row of terraced houses, and so physically we're much more connected because we are all a big kind of accordion of connected things that now post-pandemic only have to ping a WhatsApp and then everyone's around each other's houses helping each other with stuff, and it's really, really nice. And I've never had that in London before, and I've never lived in this type of housing before. So I think, like, also watching YouTube documentaries about social housing and its history, found out that like big kind of brutalist tower blocks in Liverpool that are now demolished and seen as horrific places to live. Well, they sometimes had this really collective approach to looking after each other's kids, or just keeping an eye on everyone's kids. So like they were designed so that it was sort of all the mums were spying on you, and you couldn't do anything naughty because everyone's mum was there being everyone's mum. And that kind of like neighborhood watch kind of idea that it's built into places like the garden cities. They have they're designed so that you can watch your kids play while you're washing up, and just like really basic stuff like that. And so I think, yeah, architecturally, that's a big question about how we can just help connect each other. Like I'm really interested in the Broadwater Farm estate in Tottenham, which, because of some kind of riots and protests in the 80s, had its walkways cut off, so you couldn't actually just go around your neighbour's flat easily because you couldn't get to it now just by going down the walkway. So it was like having its like arteries cut as punishment for it being difficult to police. And it was police violence that caused a lot of the social issues and unrest anyway. And so it's like, I think partly it's really literal and really physical. Like, how do we, if we all aspire to have a driveway and a picket fence and, you know, or like a gated community, then like gated and community, like, you know, a high security gate and community don't always really go naturally hand in hand. So the spaces where people mingle and mix are really important. And so that's why it's really important for artists to create those spaces, but also for there to be a range of different places where people are kind of bumping into each other, and there's no barriers to just starting a little chat.
It really links to Frances Hatherley, who we had on the show earlier in the year, and she was talking specifically about the working class female grotesque, and the idea that we're all, no matter where we come from, we're all kind of taught to feel a bit of shame around what certain women look like. But it's also the same in terms of, you know, the ideals of what we're shown we should want and should have, like housing and, you know, a way of living. And it is that that completely made up ideal of, you know, house, kids, dog, car, driveway type thing. And that you just kind of pushed from being children to aim for.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like that is something that I've grown up with, the kind of a very new Labour 90s model of we're all middle class now, aspirational, let's work hard and raise ourselves above what went before. And this kind of social mobility that maybe for my parents' generation really existed on the housing ladder, of kind of move house all the time so that you can make a bit of money each time. And maybe that does sort of exist for people that have the means to do that, maybe in London. I know some people that have still sort of done that flipping and moving up financially. But I think it's very different for young people now, and for artists, and for most people now, really, access to this idea of kind of everyone going up a ladder, which is obviously a kind of myth, because how can we all kind of have more resources on a finite planet? Like, it kind of, it's connected to the way that sort of consumer capitalism has based all of its ideas on extracting wealth rather than co-creating wealth. And so like inequality is built into the economic model, and it's almost fetishized because you want to be at the top, you want it to be unequal if you're going to win. Like, and so I think the things that we are taught to aspire to often you can get them for free another way, like just by sharing something or thinking, but what is the thing I actually want from that? Oh, it's to be loved or for people to think that I'm cool. Oh, well, is there another way you could get that? And I think this kind of finding a way around something, like by setting up your own art school or by just kind of making your own version of the thing that you think you want. Like, it isn't always something that we consume, it can be something that we make. And I think, like, really, like, even if you look at sort of TikTok or something, which I don't really look at, but like I was reading how it's the content that people really want to see is people making stuff. I think we're really drawn towards making things, and that's more of an exciting, desirable, relatable thing to see than just somebody having succeeded to gain more, to like accumulate more wealth than everyone else. So maybe the influencer is changing as well, and maybe we'll be able to figure out other ways of kind of like doing community with regards to kids, but also just each other. And I'm aware it sounds really hippie-ish, and I live like with my girlfriend and my cat and about 5 other cats that keep walking in and out that are not my cat. And like I have this very sort of like lots of free time compared to my friends who have kids. I kind of have this individualized life in a way. So I haven't found enough ways to connect, but I do create the different ways of connecting, whether that's running a kind of performance art night that people can contribute to in a quite an open mic way, or whether that's reaching out to neighbours, going to the allotment that's at the end of our road, just kind of like organising little things. And it's, for me, I think that's less of a commitment to doing one thing, like raising one child for the rest of their life, but more of a tapas of like sort of a different thing every week that I'm doing that creates community in some way. And that resonates much more with just what I'm like, which is I seek novelty and struggle to commit to the sort of longevity of a project. So yeah, I think that there's so many different ways basically to do community and to do family, but we need to make them all visible because they're not visible on family trees. They're not really visible even if you're an art practitioner that does, or an artist that does social practice. Like with the amount of work you're doing in your social practice, it's like that should be somehow written up and like documented and held and shown, and like it is something which exists a lot in the present of the participants. And I think sometimes like we would all benefit from having a platform to reflect and to be kind of have some sort of permanence to this doing the work, like the actually doing the work in the moment, rather than just the spectacle or the performative, like take the picture and, you know, show you've done it. Like your work is so much about actually doing the thing, and then documentation is like it's secondary to that, because that's not about the people or the actual stuff of it. Like, so
just who's got a camera.
Yeah, well, like you do that, but like I sometimes think like all of this stuff could do with packaging and theorizing, and then having a secondary audience that is able to reflect on what happened and then what that means for what's possible next. And I don't think that arts institutions really consider that enough. And it means that social practice is always secondary to the main event, which is an object, which is consumable and tradable on a market. And that creates a very individualized way of being an artist, I think. So we're the worst. We're the worst of the lot, you know, artists. We create neoliberal hell for ourselves while pretending that we're somehow above it and critical of it. And I include myself in that as well, because, you know, we're products of art schools and education systems that measure us all, and then we're trying to be like original, and we're trying to market ourselves, and like it just sometimes I struggle to motivate myself to do that, because where are my lionesses?
You've got them. You've definitely got them. Yeah. Louise, you've been amazing, and we've talked a good long time, which I knew we would, which is fantastic. I love hearing about your work, and I love hearing your mind as well. So I'm excited for the listeners. I want you to plug it, So please, can you tell us when is your show, and tell us what's happening.
So my show about reproductive rights and ambivalence about childlessness and all this stuff is at Camden People's Theatre, which is near Warren Street in London, on the 27th and 28th of September. And the tickets are available either at Camden People's Theatre website, or you can go on my website, which is louiseashcroft.org, and you'll see on the homepage there are icons, one of me sitting with a little bird hut, and you can click on that and it will let you book tickets. So it's at 9 p.m, which is past everyone's bedtime, but that's the slot that they gave me, so I've got to take it. And if anyone wants me to tour this show at their prestigious theatre venue or in their gallery, I'm happy to make a film version of it. Like, I just want to get this out to as many people as possible, so that we can ask the questions that parents and non-parents are all asking. Like, single straight women friends that want kids but that haven't met someone to have kids with, but are thinking, will I do it on my own? Like, the gays, the straights, the people with 5 kids, that, like, you know, people, I know so many people going through IVF, for example, or people that are having artificial insemination, and people that did that in the 80s when there were rogue collectives of people doing that themselves. And, you know, people looking online. There's so much going on, but there isn't actually that much out there in terms of like documented official histories of this. So I'm also interested in connecting with people that are researching this stuff, or that are going through things that want to chat about it, because I'm having lots of little coffees with people who are somehow thinking about these things. It does include parents, and how parents can kind of help each other to do co-parenting, but without necessarily founding a commune in the middle of nowhere, which sometimes ends up in a horror film. But you know, it doesn't always, but I'm always suspicious of my tendency towards extreme, like, ideological solutions, so I tend to tone them down a little bit. But if anyone wants to reach out, you can, like, my Instagram is @LouiseAshcroft1, and my email is ashcroftlouise@gmail.com. So get in touch and we can have a chat.
We can put all of these ways to contact you and how to book tickets for the show on the show notes as well. So send them over to us, Louise, and we'll get those in. Thank you very much. You've been amazing.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I've been wanting to come on it for ages. Bye.
Bye, Louise. Thank you.
You've been listening to Woman Up. Woman Up is a podcast created by artists Amy Dignam and Susan Merrick in partnership with Procreate Project. For more episodes, please visit us at procreateproject.com or find us on all your usual podcast platforms.